talking about how we were putting in place this time of peace.
Und wir haben diese Zeit des Friedens an Platz gesetzt.
And we're showing about how when this, in history, when this time of trouble repeats, it's a copy of the beast that was before it.
Wir haben gezeigt, wie, wenn diese Zeit der Trübsal sich wiederholt, dass eine Kopie ist von dem Tier, das davor war.
Okay, so the pattern that's laid out in the type must be followed in the antitype, right?
Das Muster, was also im Typus ausgelegt ist, muss auch im Antitypus erfolgen.
Okay, and that's where we finished, but we're just going to go back to the quote that we were reading yesterday.
Und da hatten wir aufgehört und jetzt gehen wir nochmal zu dem Zitat zurück, das wir gestern gelesen haben.
Okay, so it says,
In den Notizen.
I saw that the two-horned beast had a dragon's mouth, and that his power was in his head. The decree would go out of his mouth. So we were pointing out that this is a future thing, marking where the death decree is going to be made, right?
Wir haben darauf hingewiesen, dass das etwas Zukünftiges ist, wenn dieses Todesdekret erlassen wird.
Then I saw the mother of harlots, that the mother was not the daughters, but separate and distinct from them. She has had her day, and it is past, and her daughters, the Protestant sects, were the next to come on the stage and act out the same mind that the mother had when she persecuted the saints. I saw that as the mother had been declining in power, the daughters had been growing, and soon they will exercise the power once exercised by the mother. I saw the nominal church and nominal Adventists, like Judas, would betray us to the Catholics to obtain their influence to come against the truth. So it's all pointing forward to a point where a death decree is going to come because people refuse to keep their false Sabbath. Right?
Das deutet alles auf einen Punkt hin, wenn dieses Todesdekret kommt, weil Leute sich weigern, ihren falschen Sabbat zu halten.
Okay, and it says that the nominal churches, which is this the Protestant sects,
Das sagt die nominalen Kirchen, was die protestantischen Sekten sind,
and the nominal Adventists,
und die nominalen Adventisten.
okay, at that time would betray those that refuse to bow down.
Sie würden zu dieser Zeit diejenigen verraten, die sich weigern, sich niederzubeugen.
Okay, it says the saints then will be an obscure people, little known to the Catholics. So it can't be talking about the Seventh-day Adventist Church as a whole.
Also es kann nicht über die 7-Tags-Adventgemeinde als Ganzes sprechen.
Because the Seventh-day Adventist Church is an 18 million church worldwide, is well known by the Catholic Church.
Weil die Adventgemeinde ist eine 18 Millionen, also hat 18 Millionen Mitglieder und das ist sehr bekannt den Katholiken.
It says, but the churches and nominal Adventists who know of our faith and customs, for they hated us on account of the Sabbath, for they could not refute it. And this point I'm making yesterday. They couldn't refute it because the people had gone forward here under the power of the latter rain to present the truths.
Und diesen Punkt hatte ich gestern gemacht, dass sie es eben nicht widerlegen konnten, weil hier Leute mit der Kraft des Spätregens vorangegangen sind, um diese Wahrheiten zu präsentieren.
Okay, and there was no arguments that they could bring against it to refute it.
Und da gab es keine Argumente, die sie dagegen bringen konnten, um es zu widerlegen.
It says, so they will betray the saints and report them to the Catholics as those who disregard the institutions of the people, that is, they keep the Sabbath and disregard Sunday. Okay, so they're reporting them because they refused to bow down and keep the false Sabbath.
Sie melden sie also, weil sie eben sich weigern, diesen falschen Sabbat, also sich niederzubeugen und den falschen Sabbat zu halten.
Okay, it says, then the Catholics bid the Protestants go forward and issue a decree that all who will not observe the first day of the week instead of the seventh day shall be slain. And the Catholics, whose numbers are large, will stand by the Protestants. The Catholics will give their power to the image of the beast, and the Protestants will work as their mother worked before them to destroy the saints. But before their decree bring or bear fruit, the saints will be delivered by the voice of God. And that leads you down to the point, right, where it's the shaking of the heavens. right?
Das führt dich dann zu dem Punkt, wenn es die Erschütterung der Himmel ist.
Okay, because we put in place yesterday, 1848, where it's the shaking of the earth, right?
Gestern haben wir am Platz gesetzt, 1848 war die Erschütterung der Erde.
Okay, and brings you down to the end, which is the shaking of the heavens and the earth,
Das
right?
führt dich zum Ende, was die Erschütterung von Himmel und Erde ist.
So from the point that they go forward to begin to proclaim the Sabbath more fully,
Also von dem Punkt an, wenn sie vorwärts gehen und den Sabbat noch vollständiger verkündigen,
okay, there comes a point where they make a death decree because all these people refuse to bow down.
dann kommt ein Punkt, wenn sie ein Todesdekret machen, weil sich all die Leute geweigert haben, sich niederzubeugen.
Which is right here.
Und das ist hier.
And the point we're making, it's an image to the beast, right?
Und das, der Punkt, den wir machen, ist es eben ein Bild zum Tier.
Okay, so we have to follow the plan that was marked out in history,
Wir
right?
müssen also dem Plan folgen, der in der Geschichte markiert wurde.
Okay, so this should be in agreement with that plan,
Und
right?
das sollte in Übereinstimmung mit diesem Plan sein.
Okay, so and it says that the very first sentence we read, or the quote,
Und der erste Satz, den wir im Zitat gelesen haben,
it says, I saw that the two-horned beast had a dragon's mouth, and that the power was in his head, and the decree would go out of his mouth. Right, so it would be a dragon speaking.
und es
Right.
wäre ein Drache, der spricht.
So as a dragon speaks at the beginning,
Also ein
Right.
Drache spricht am Anfang,
okay, when it first begins, but it marks a point where the dragon is going to speak here.
also
Right?
wenn es zuerst anfängt, aber dann markiert es einen Punkt, wenn der Drache hier spricht.
Okay, we will see why that's important in a moment.
Wir werden dann gleich sehen, warum das wichtig ist.
It says, but before that decree bring forth or bear fruit, the saints will be delivered by the voice of God. Then I saw that Jesus' work in the sanctuary will soon be finished. So from this point, she sees that his work would soon be finished.
Von diesem
Right.
Punkt an sieht sie, dass sein Werk bald zu Ende sein wird.
And we'll mark this last work here before the end comes.
Und das
Right?
markiert dieses letzte Werk, bevor das Ende kommt.
Okay, so go to the next quote.
Geht zum nächsten Zitat.
And this is a quote we're familiar with, but we haven't read it for some time.
Das ist ein Zitat, mit dem wir vertraut sind, aber wir haben es seit längerer Zeit nicht mehr gelesen.
It said, but what is the image to the beast, and how is it to be formed? The image is made by the two-horned beast, and is an image to the first beast. So it copies the first beast, right?
Es kopiert also das erste Tier.
It is also called an image of the beast. Then to learn what the image is like and how it is to be formed, we must study the characteristics of the beast itself, the papacy. When the early church became corrupted by departing from the simplicity of the gospel and accepting heathen rites and customs, she lost the spirit and power of God, and in order to control the consciences of the people, she sought the support of the secular power. The result was the papacy, a church that controlled the power of the state and employed it to further her own ends, especially for the punishment of heresy. In order for the United States to form an image of the beast, the religious power must so control the civil government that the authority of the state will also be employed by the church to accomplish her own ends. So it will be used by the church to stamp out heresy, right?
Also es wurde von der also Kirche wird es benutzt, um die Irrlehren herauszumerzen.
Okay, so when we go to the just to take the types for instance, right?
Also wenn wir die Typen jetzt zum Beispiel nehmen,
Here we have the history, right, of Babylon all the way down to 1798.
hier haben wir die Geschichte von Babylon bis 1798.
But we know, right, that when you bring line upon line together, this is also a representation of the 1260,
Aber
right?
wir wissen, wenn man Linie auf Linie zusammenbringt, ist das auch eine Darstellung der 1260.
And this likewise,
Und genauso ist das hier.
and this likewise,
Auch
right?
das hier.
And we've been going through this, how it's showing this time of persecution at different levels, right?
Wir sind da durchgegangen, haben gezeigt, wie das eine Zeit der Verfolgung auf verschiedenen Ebenen darstellt.
And at least from my perspective, what it's doing with all these different symbols and different illustrations, it's breaking down this time of trouble into segments to show us different phases of that experience, right?
Und aus meiner Perspektive sehe ich das so, dass dass es das herunterbricht in diese verschiedenen Abschnitte, zeigt es uns diese different experience?
Phases
Verschiedene Phasen
of that experience.
dieser Erfahrung.
Okay, so because even in the 1260 literal years, there was different periods in there where different things happened to the church.
Selbst in diesen 1260 Jahren, da gab es verschiedene Phasen, die dann dort passiert sind mit der Gemeinde.
Okay, but I just want us to see that the United States is making a copy, right?
Und den Punkt, den ich euch sehen lassen will, die USA macht also eine Kopie.
But what we read is that first of all they make the decree, and then there's a period of time before they're going to copy what she did in persecuting God's people in the past, right?
Was wir gelesen haben, sie they make a decree.
They make a decree, and then there's a period of time before they repeat what they did.
Okay, also sie machen ein Dekret, aber dann gibt es eine Zeitspanne, bevor sie dann das wiederholen, dass sie eben die Heiligen verfolgen.
Okay, and history is going to repeat itself,
Und
right?
die Geschichte wird sich wiederholen.
So you can see that Rome, here's this dragon right here, right?
Wir können sehen, dass Rom hier dieser Drache ist.
We're marking here that when this decree is made, it's the dragon speaking.
Wir haben
Right?
das markiert, wenn das Dekret gemacht wird, dann spricht der Drache.
Okay, so this pattern here, right, is going to repeat.
Also
Right?
dieses Muster wird sich wiederholen.
Okay, there's some things about this pattern we have to look at very, very
Da
closely.
gibt's Dinge über das Muster, was wir uns ganz genau anschauen müssen.
Okay, go to the next quote.
Gehen wir zum nächsten Zitat.
It says, under the symbols of a great red dragon, which is pagan Rome.
Dieser große rote Drache ist das heidnische Rom.
Okay, a leopard-like beast and a beast with lamb-like horns. So that's the pagan Rome, papal Rome, and then the United States.
Also
Right?
das ist das heidnische Rom, das päpstliche Rom und dann die USA.
It says, and a beast with lamb-like horns, the earthly governments which would especially engage in trampling upon God's law and persecuting his people were presented to John. Right? So what was presented to John was the dragon, the papacy, and then the United States. Right?
Was also Johannes präsentiert wurde, war der Drache, das Papsttum und dann die USA.
Okay, it says, the war is carried on till the close of time. The people of God, symbolized by a holy woman and her children, were represented as greatly in the minority. In the last days, only a remnant still existed. Of these John speaks as they which keep the commandments of God and of the testimony of Jesus Christ. Through paganism and then through the papacy, Satan exerted his power for many centuries in an effort to blot from the earth God's faithful witnesses. Pagans and papists were actuated by the same dragon spirit. They differed only in that the papacy, making a pretense of serving God, was the more dangerous and cruel foe. Through the agency of Romanism, Satan took the world captive. The professed Church of God was swept into the ranks of this delusion, and for more than 1,000 years the people of God suffered under the dragon's ire. And when the papacy, robbed of its strength, was forced to desist from persecution, John beheld a new power coming up to echo the dragon's voice and carry forward the same cruel and blasphemous work. This power, the last that is to wage war against the church and the law of God, was symbolized by a beast with lamb-like horns. So the beast with lamb-like horns is going to make an image to the beast, right?
Das Tier mit den lammähnlichen Hörnern wird ein Bild dem Tier machen.
Which is an image of the beast.
Das ist ein Bild des Tieres.
It's a copy of the beast,
Das ist
right?
eine Kopie des Tieres.
And it says to understand that, you have to understand that how did the beast do that? It was when church and state joined together, and the church used the state to persecute heretics, right?
Und wie man dann weiß, wie das Bild ist, muss man eben zurückgehen und dann sieht man, wie die, also wie das, wie ist es heute? Beast. Okay, also wie das Tier, also wo Kirche und Staat zusammengekommen sind, und dann hat die Kirche den Staat benutzt, um die Irrlehrer zu bestrafen.
Okay, it says, this power, the last that is to wage war against the church and the law of God, was symbolized by a beast with lamb-like horns. The beast preceding it had risen from the sea, but this came up out of the earth, representing the peaceful rise of the nation which is symbolized. The two horns, like a lamb, well represent the character of the United States government as expressed in its two fundamental principles, republicanism and Protestantism. These principles are the secret of our power and prosperity as a nation. Those who first found an asylum on the shores of America rejoiced that they had reached a country free from the arrogant claims of popery and the tyranny of kingly rule. They determined to establish a government upon the broad foundation of civil and religious liberty. So the United States, right, is the last to wage war, right?
Also die USA ist die letzte, die Krieg führen wird.
Okay, but somehow this power is going to copy paganism and papalism before it, right?
Aber diese Macht wird eben das Heidentum und das Papsttum, was davor war, kopieren.
Okay, it's going to go down through these same steps.
Es wird dieselben Schritte hindurchgehen.
Okay, it says, but the stern tracing of the prophetic pencil reveals a change in this peaceful scene. The beast with lamb-like horns speaks with the voice of a dragon and exercises all the power of the first beast before him. Prophecy declares that he will say to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast, and that he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Thus, Protestantism follows in the steps of the papacy. Okay, so let's look at this. Go to Revelation 13.
Schauen wir uns das an. Gehen wir jetzt auf Morgen 13.
So it says, I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth. He had two horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. Right? So the two-horned beast comes up here like a lamb, speaks as a dragon.
Das
Right?
eine Getier kommt hier herauf wie ein Lamm und spricht wie ein Drache.
And he exercises all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. Now, so when the deadly wound's healed, means that the woman is now in control again,
Wenn
right?
die tödliche Wunde geheilt ist, dann bedeutet es, dass die Frau wieder in Kontrolle ist.
Okay, so we know Sister White takes the 1260, right, and she puts it at the beginning of the Sunday, right?
Wir wissen, dass Ellen White die 1260 nimmt und am Anfang des Sonntagsgesetzes hinsetzt.
Okay, there's other ways we can show that, because we know that the 1260 paralleled the 70 years in Babylon, right?
Es gibt noch andere Wege, wie man das zeigen kann. Wir wissen zum Beispiel, dass die 1260 Jahre parallel sind zu den 70 Jahren in Babylon.
Okay, and so, and the 70, the 1260 and the 70 is also the 400 years in Egypt.
Und die
Right?
1260 und die 70 sind auch die 400 Jahre in Ägypten.
We've been through all these, so you can show that this is this period of captivity,
Und
right?
wir sind da durchgegangen und man kann zeigen, dass das diese Zeitspanne der Gefangenschaft ist.
Comes to an end, but then it's going to repeat.
Es kommt
Right?
dann zum Ende und dann wird es sich wiederholen.
So we know at the end of the world that both these times here will be the same pattern, right?
Also wir wissen, am Ende der Welt wird beide dieser Zeiten dasselbe Muster sein.
Okay, so verse 13. Right?
Vers 13.
And he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of men. So Christ standing here, and he says what?
Christus steht hier und sagt was?
Be not deceived. Right?
Werdet nicht verführt.
Okay, so that's why he gives us a clear understanding of what's taken here, and he says the end is not yet. These things must first come to pass, right?
Deswegen gibt er uns ein klares Verständnis und sagt, das Ende ist noch nicht. Diese Dinge müssen zuerst geschehen.
Okay, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth, that they should make an image to the beast, which had the wound by a sword and did live. Okay, so clearly showing that 1848, right, he is marking the point where the Sunday law was beginning, right?
Sie zeigt klar, dass 1848 diesen Punkt markiert, wo das Sonntagsgesetz angefangen hat.
Those false prophets rose up and said that this is the day of the Lord,
Wo die falschen Propheten aufstanden und gesagt haben, dies ist der Tag des Herrn,
which is the second coming of Christ.
was die Wiederkunft Christi ist.
And we read in Luke 21 that many false prophets shall rise saying, I am Christ,
In
right?
Lukas 21 haben wir gelesen, dass viele falsche Propheten aufstehen werden und sagen werden, ich bin Christus.
Okay, but this is this deception,
Das
right?
ist aber diese Täuschung.
Verse 15.
Vers 15.
It says, and he had power to give life unto the image of the beast. What is the image of the beast?
Was ist das Bild des Tieres?
It's the copy, right?
Das ist die Kopie.
So after this decree's gone forth, it says now, he had power to give life unto the image of the beast.
Also nachdem dieses Dekret dann vorwärts gegangen ist, sagt es dann, er hatte Kraft, dem Bild des Tieres Leben zu geben.
That the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. So this is this decree that was going to come out of his mouth after the Sunday law had begun, right?
Das ist also das Dekret, was aus seinem Mund kommen sollte, nachdem das Sonntagsgesetz angefangen hat.
Yes?
Ja.
It says, and he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Right, so, and this is confirmed by this next quote that we're also familiar with.
Und das wird bestätigt durch das nächste Zitat, mit dem wir auch vertraut sind.
Trial and persecution will come to all who in obedience to the word of God refuse to worship this false Sabbath. Force is the last resort of every false religion. At first it tries attraction, as the king of Babylon tried the power of music and outward show. If these attractions, invented by men, inspired by Satan, failed to make men worship the image, the hungry flames of the furnace were ready to consume them. So it will be now. The papacy has exercised her power to compel men to obey her, and she will continue to do so. We need the same spirit that was manifested by God's servants in the conflict with paganism. Okay, so first they try and deceive, don't receive the deceptions, then they're going to put you to death, right?
Zuerst versuchen sie dich zu verführen und wenn du die Verführung nicht annimmst, dann werden sie dich zu Tode bringen.
Okay, so Christ is standing on the Mount of Olives.
Christus
Right.
steht auf dem Ölberg.
He says, be not deceived.
Er sagt, werdet nicht verführt.
These things must first come to pass.
Diese Dinge müssen zuerst geschehen.
And then in verse 11 it says,
Und dann in
verse 9, sorry,
Matthäus 24, Vers 9,
says, then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted. So what do we see?
also dann werden sie euch ausliefern, um bedrängt zu werden. Was sehen wir also?
What do we see in agreement with Revelation 13?
Was sehen wir in Übereinstimmung mit Offenbarung 13?
This calls us to worship. Is it agree?
No, but just follow the pattern we were. What was the point? I'm agreeing with you on that, but that's not what I'm asking. I'm saying what. This is verse 9, right?
Das ist ja Vers 9.
There was 8 verses before it.
Es gab
Right.
8 Verse
When I'm
zuvor.
just saying there, he says, "Be not deceived." right?
Ich habe das erwähnt, hier sagt er, werdet nicht verführt.
Okay, then it comes, so these things must first come to pass,
Diese
right?
Dinge müssen zuerst geschehen.
Then, right? So I'm now asking the question, what do we see in agreement with the pattern in Revelation 13?
Die Frage ist jetzt, was können wir sehen in Übereinstimmung mit dem Muster aus Offenbarung 13?
Yeah, first comes the deception and then comes the persecution, right?
Zuerst kommt die Täuschung und dann die Verfolgung.
Right?
Richtig?
Christ said, be not deceived. So the deception was coming first. First they're going to bring fire down from heaven, right?
Jesus hat gesagt, werde nicht verführt. Also die Verführung kommt zuerst und das ist, wenn sie das Feuer vom Himmel bringen.
And tell everybody that they have to make an image to the beast,
Sie
right?
sollen dann jedem sagen, dass sie dem Tier ein Bild machen
And
sollen.
the image to the beast is Sunday worship,
Das
right?
Bild des Tieres ist Sonntagsanbetung.
Okay. So, because it says, then they shall deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and ye shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. And then shall many be offended, and shall betray one another, and shall hate one another. And many false prophets shall rise, and deceive many. So, again, when you get to this point, what's coming?
Wieder, wenn man zu diesem Punkt kommt, was kommt?
False prophets, right?
Falsche Propheten.
Okay, because so the point was we started yesterday was marking the end of the time of trouble, time of peace. Trouble is going to repeat, right?
Gestern hatten wir diesen Punkt gemacht, das Ende der Zeit der Trübsal, Zeit des Friedens, und dann wiederholt sich die Zeit der Trübsal.
And what we see in here, right, is two phases,
Was wir
right?
hier drin sehen können, sind zwei Phasen.
So we're going to take this now and we're going to come down here, right?
Wir werden das jetzt nehmen und hier runterbringen.
So here's the deceptions speaking as a dragon, right?
Hier sind die Täuschungen, da spricht er wie ein Drache.
These things must first come to pass,
Diese
right?
Dinge müssen zuerst geschehen.
Okay? Then, right?
Dann.
So what's happening here the same as here?
Was geschieht dann hier? Dasselbe wie da oben.
Yeah, there's false prophets, but what's the first point?
Das ist nochmal der erste Punkt.
Speaking as a dragon,
Er
right?
spricht wie ein Drache.
Okay, so this is the death decree, right?
Das ist das Todesdekret.
And then you have false prophets.
Dann hat man falsche Propheten.
So in one sense, it's a starts off. He speaks as a dragon. Okay, so there's these deceptions come in, and now there's this persecution, right?
Also in einem Sinne spricht er wie ein Drache, da kommt diese Verführung und dann fängt die Verfolgung an.
Paralleling this, right?
Parallel mit dem hier.
But in another sense, okay, the false prophets that rise up here, there's also false prophets rise up here, right?
Und im anderen Sinne, die falschen Propheten, die hier aufstehen, da gibt es auch falsche Propheten, die hier aufstehen.
Yeah. So although the persecution begins here, the deception is also increasing here, right?
Obwohl die Verfolgung hier anfängt, nimmt auch die Verführung zu.
Okay. So the point I want to see is again on this small part, you have these two times of trouble,
Der
right?
Punkt, den ich euch sehen lassen will, auch in dem kleineren Fraktal hat man diese zwei Zeiten der Trübsal.
Okay, and they are marked by World War One,
Denn durch den Ersten Weltkrieg
okay, and World War Two, right?
und den Zweiten Weltkrieg markiert.
Because we read yesterday that the image of the beast test is the test that the people of God must have before they're sealed, right?
Wir haben das Zitat gestern gelesen, das Bild des Tierestest ist der Test, den Gottes Volk haben muss, bevor sie versiegelt werden.
And what is the seal of God?
Und was ist das Siegel Gottes?
No, I'm asking you to just explain what the seal of God is, not what else it represents.
Nicht, was,
What does it mean to us? What does it encompass?
was bedeutet das für uns? Was beinhaltet es? Settling to truth.
Okay, that's an explanation. Okay, settling into the truth intellectually and spiritually. So what does that mean?
Also, dass man sich in der Wahrheit gründet, intellektuell und auch geistlich. Und was bedeutet das?
My people are destroyed for what?
Mein Volk wird
Okay, so there's
zerstört
the intellectual knowledge, right?
aus Mangel an Erkenntnis. Das ist jetzt die intellektuelle Erkenntnis.
Okay, and the intellectual knowledge leads you to have a spiritual experience,
Und
right?
das intellektuelle Verständnis führt dich dann dazu, dass du eine geistliche Erfahrung
Okay, the former and the latter rain,
hast.
right?
Der frühen und der spätrigen.
And once you have that spiritual experience, what happens to you?
Und sobald du diese geistliche Erfahrung hast, was geschieht mit dir?
You lose your fear of death.
No, okay, that might be true. That's not what I'm asking. I'm all about you, genetically how you're built. What happens to you?
Ich meinte jetzt genetisch, wie man gebaut ist, was geschieht mit dir?
Create the image of
Yeah, you're being recreated,
Du
right?
wirst neu geschaffen.
Okay, so it's about a change in your DNA,
Das
right?
geht um eine Veränderung in deiner DNA.
Because when sin came in the world, our DNA was corrupted, right?
Als die Sünde in die Welt kam, wurde unsere DNA verdorben.
So the seal, when you receive the seal of God, can you fall backwards anymore?
Wenn du das Siegel Gottes erhältst, kannst du dann noch zurückfallen?
No.
No, when you've received the seal of God, that's it. You'll remain in that condition, right?
Nein, wenn du das Siegel Gottes erhalten hast, dann ist das so, dann bleibst du in diesem Zustand.
Okay, and this is the point, right? It's a change in your DNA.
Und das ist der Punkt, das ist eine Veränderung in deiner DNA.
Okay, and we know that this two world wars are a symbol of the DNA,
Wir
right?
wissen, dass diese zwei Weltkriege ein Symbol für die DNA ist.
4 years and 6 years, right?
4 und 6 Jahre.
So, because the image of the beast test is the Sunday law test, right?
Weil der Bild des Tieres-Test ist das Sonntagsgesetz.
Okay, and this is the Sunday law, right?
Das ist ja das Sonntagsgesetz.
So the image of the beast is the test that the people of God must have before they're sealed, must have before their DNA is changed, right?
Das Bild des Tieres-Test ist der Test, den Gottes Volk haben muss, bevor sie versiegelt werden, also bevor ihre DNA verändert werden kann.
Okay, so, however, Satan is counterfeiting this. He's going to bring these troubles to try and counter that work, right?
Aber Satan fälscht das und er wird diese Trübsale bringen, um diesem Werk entgegenzuwirken.
Because this is a symbol of paganism and papalism, right?
Das ist ein Symbol für das
I understand.
Heidentum und Papsttum.
Okay, because how would we show that? For instance, paganism is the father, right?
Zum Beispiel das Heidentum ist der Vater
Papalism is the son.
und das Papsttum ist der Sohn.
And there's something about these two tables of stone. One's for God and one's for man, right?
Da ist was mit diesen Steintafeln. Also die eine Tafel ist für Gott und die andere für den Menschen.
Christ, the son, became a man, right?
Und Christus, der Sohn, wurde ein Mensch.
Okay, so there's something about this, how Satan is counterfeiting the work of changing our DNA, right?
Und da ist etwas damit, wie Satan dieses Werk der Veränderung unserer DNA fälscht.
Okay, what does Sister White say about war? What does it do?
Was sagt Ellen White über den Krieg? Was macht es?
Brings forth the worst passions.
It brings forth the worst passions in human beings, right?
Es bringt die schlimmsten Leidenschaften in Menschen hervor.
So what, in essence, when a war comes, what are men doing?
Also in der Essenz, wenn ein Krieg kommt, was machen die Menschen?
They're demonstrating their character,
Sie
right?
demonstrieren ihren Charakter.
We'll have to look at what these people are doing to one another and how terrible these things are that's happening at the moment, right?
Und wir müssen uns nur das anschauen, was die Leute gerade miteinander tun, also sich gegenseitig antun, was gerade geschieht.
And we really haven't seen anything yet,
Und
right?
wir haben wirklich noch gar nichts gesehen.
What come will, I think, shock the whole world.
Und was kommen wird, das wird, glaube ich, die ganze Welt schockieren.
Okay, so the point is, here we have two times of trouble,
Der
right?
Punkt ist, hier haben wir 2 Zeiten der Trübsal.
So we know when we came to the end of the Second World War, which would be here,
Wir
right?
wissen, wenn wir zum Ende des Zweiten Weltkrieges kommen, was hier wäre,
United Nations, right?
da gab es den Vereinigten Nationen.
You come to the end of the First World War, you have the League of Nations,
Wenn man
right?
zum Ende des Ersten Weltkriegs kommt, da war der Völkerbund.
So it's showing you this pattern, how it's repeating on different levels,
Das
right?
zeigt dir also das Muster, wie es sich auf verschiedenen Ebenen wiederholt.
Okay, so go back to Matthew 24, verse 11.
Geht zurück zu Matthäus 24, Vers 11.
And many false prophets shall rise and deceive many, and because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. But he that shall endure unto the end, the same shall be saved. Right? So this is this end here, right?
Das ist dieses Ende hier.
Because it's speaking about from the time that they deliver you up, that you've got to wait until, right?
Ja, das spricht von der Zeit, wo sie dich ausliefern, bis du warten musst.
And this is speaking about God's people here, right?
Also das spricht über Gottes Volk.
Their end is here.
Ihr
Right?
Ende ist hier.
And then it says, verse 14,
Und dann sagt es Vers 14.
and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached. And we made this point yesterday. What is it now referring to?
Und dieses Evangelium des Reiches wird verkündet, also gepredigt werden. Auf was haben wir das besprochen? Bezieht sich das?
I mean, look, it doesn't pay to leave this classroom and just forget everything we spoke about. It's the midnight cry,
Das ist der Mitternachtsruf.
right? This is the whole point. Spend 4 days going through this midnight cry here, right?
Das war der ganze Punkt. Wir haben 4 Tage damit verbracht durch den Mitternachtsruf.
So when you come to the end here, the Lord has a people now filled with the Holy Spirit,
Wenn
right?
man hier zum Ende kommt, hat der Herr jetzt ein Volk, das mit dem Heiligen Geist gefüllt ist.
We're going to preach the gospel.
Und die werden das Evangelium
What
predigen.
is the gospel?
Was ist das Evangelium?
It's the 3 angels' messages, right?
3 Engelsbotschaften.
Look, we've marked and placed the midnight cry as the 3rd angel, which encompasses all 3, right?
Der Mitternachtsruf ist der 3. Engel, was alle 3 beinhaltet.
So right here, they're preaching with power the gospel, the 3 angels' messages,
Also
right?
hier predigen sie mit Kraft das Evangelium, die 3 Engelsbotschaften.
It says, because in the quote, the one that we read, the very first quote that we read,
Also das erste Zitat, das wir gelesen haben,
Spalding McGann 2.1,
SPM 2.1,
okay, which is the second paragraph.
der 2. Absatz.
And this is when they make the death decree, right?
Wenn sie das Todesdekret
Oh,
machen,
it's
ist
here,
das.
right? So, but then we read down, so it says, then the Catholics bid the Protestants go forward and issue a decree that all who will not observe the first day of the week instead of the 7th shall be slain, right? But then it says, but before their decree bring or bear fruit, the saints will be delivered by the voice of God. So it brings you to this point, which is this point,
Die
right?
Heiligen werden durch die Stimme Gottes befreit werden, das ist dieser Punkt.
Okay. It says, then I saw that Jesus' work in the sanctuary will soon be finished. So what's he doing here?
Was macht er hier?
He's interceding for those whilst the message or the gospel is going forward.
Er
Right?
hält Fürsprache für diejenigen, also während diese Botschaft, das Evangelium vorwärts geht.
Okay. So go back to Matthew 24.
Geht zurück zu Matthäus 24.
Okay, where was we?
Das 14.
Ah, yes, verse 14. It says,
Vers 14.
this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. So it's a different end,
Das
right?
ist jetzt ein anderes Ende.
Okay, and marking here for the end now for this last group,
Das
right?
markiert jetzt das Ende für die letzte Gruppe.
Okay, now it comes to verse 15, right?
Jetzt kommt es zu Vers 15.
And it's now going to bring you back to this point where they speak as a dragon here,
Jetzt
right?
wird es dich wieder zurück zu dem Punkt führen, wenn sie wie ein Drache sprechen.
So Sister White takes this point, principally, she applies it there, right?
Also den Weit nimmt diesen Punkt und setzt es vom Prinzip her hier hin.
So we know this is 1260, right?
Deswegen wissen wir, dass es 1260 ist.
But the Bible perfectly is applying it here, right?
Die Bibel setzt das im vollkommenen Sinne hier hin.
Okay, it's so because it says, when ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand. Now if you go to the book of Daniel, and you were just to take the pattern, right?
Also wenn du zum Buch Daniel gehst und nur das Muster nehmen würdest,
Where would that be?
wo wäre das?
Okay, so first of all, let's put this in place, right? So you have the lion, the bear,
Man hat erstmal hier den Löwen, den Bären,
leopard.
der Leopard,
So that's these two horns.
das sind die 2 Hörner.
Brings you to the time of peace.
Das führt dich zu der Zeit des Friedens.
That is 4 little horns.
Das sind die 4 kleinen Hörner.
Okay. And then you have this dragon power.
Und dann gibt es diese Drachenmacht.
Followed by this last little horn, right?
Gefolgt von dem letzten kleinen Horn.
Okay, so let's go back to verse 15.
Gehen wir zurück zu Vers 15.
When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet. What's it speaking of? What is the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet?
Was ist der Gräuel der Verwüstung, der von dem Propheten Daniel geredet wurde?
The answer is the papacy, right?
Das Papsttum.
Okay. But where do we find it in Daniel?
Aber wo finden wir das in Daniel?
Okay, Daniel 11, right?
Daniel 11.
And we made this point. Daniel 11 is just an expansion or a greater illustration of Daniel 7 and 8,
Wir
right?
haben den Punkt gemacht, dass Daniel 11 einfach eine Erweiterung, eine Vertiefung zu Daniel 8 ist.
And
7 und 8.
okay, and that's what's illustrated here, right?
Und das wird hier dargestellt.
So my question is, Christ says, when ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoke by Daniel the prophet, right?
Also Christus sagt, wenn ihr den Gräuel der Verwüstung seht, dem Daniel geredet hat.
Okay, so according to the pattern, where is the abomination of desolation?
Und gemäß dem Muster, wo ist der Gräuel der Verwüstung?
To the pattern of Matthew 24, then
No, I'm on about if you go to Daniel 11 and you compare it with Daniel 7 and 8, where is the abomination of desolation?
Wenn man zu Daniel 11 geht und mit Daniel 7 und 8 vergleicht, wo ist der Gräuel der Verwüstung?
Okay, so here, right?
Hier.
Okay, this point. So, right. So Sister White takes this verse, right, and she puts it here, right,
Ellen White nimmt diesen Vers und setzt ihn hier hin.
right. The Bible, Daniel 7 and 8, puts it here, right.
Die Bibel, also Daniel 7 und 8, setzt es hier hin.
But Matthew 24, when you just follow it down in its conclusion, puts it here, right?
Matthäus 24, wenn man der Schlussfolgerung also folgt, dann setzt es das hier hin.
Okay, so we were to take this now and bring it down here, right?
Wenn wir das jetzt nehmen und hier runterbringen,
Okay, this last point here would be illustrated by this, right?
dann würde dieser letzte Punkt durch das hier dargestellt werden.
Okay, so you have 1260 here.
Hat 1260 hier,
You'd have, you can put it here. 1260 here, 1260 there, right?
1260 hier und 1260 da.
There's a reason why it's doing that,
Es
right?
gibt einen Grund, warum es das zeigt.
Christ and Sister White, they're not contradicting the Bible. Right?
Christus und Ellen White widersprechen der Bibel nicht.
Okay, but Christ, when he explains it in Matthew 24, he's not placing it here, he's placing it here, right?
Christus, wenn das in Matthäus 24 erklärt, dann setzt es nicht hierhin, sondern hierhin.
Okay, so but if you were to go to Daniel 11, just take the pattern, it would be here,
Wenn
right?
man zu Daniel 11 geht und das Muster einfach nimmt, dann wäre das hier.
Okay, and you can easily prove this point,
Man
right?
kann das leicht beweisen.
Verse 15.
Vers 15.
When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand. Then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains, let them which be on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house. If you jump down to verse 21.
Geht zu Vers 21.
For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of this world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. Now, okay, so we're going to prove Christ takes this great tribulation, right, which is speaking about the abomination of desolation, right?
Also wir werden jetzt beweisen, weil Christus nimmt die große Trübsal, was über den Gräuel der Verwüstung spricht.
And he's going to place it here, right?
Und er wird es hier hinsetzen.
But we know that this is marking Daniel 12:1, right?
Wir wissen, das markiert Daniel 12, Vers 1.
Right? Daniel 12:1, when Michael stands up, right?
Wenn Michael aufsteht.
Because this is where they get delivered.
Weil hier werden sie befreit.
When are they delivered?
Wann werden sie befreit?
At midnight,
An Mitternacht.
where the cry is going to be given,
Wenn
right?
der Ruf gegeben
So
wird.
just let's remind us of that. Go to Daniel 12:1.
Zur Erinnerung gehen wir zu Daniel 12, Vers 1.
Verse 1.
Vers 1.
It says, And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince which standeth for the children of thy people, and there shall be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. That's the same language that's marked in Matthew 24, right?
Das ist dieselbe Sprache, die auch in Matthäus 24 markiert
For
ist.
this great tribulation,
Diese große Trübsal,
which is by the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel, right?
was durch den Gräuel der Verwüstung kommt, der von Daniel geredet wurde.
And it says, And at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. And we know, according to the pattern, it's the seventh plague where God's people are delivered,
Und
right?
gemäß dem Muster wissen wir, dass es die 7. Plage ist, wo Gottes Volk befreit wird.
And many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake. It's speaking about the parable of the 10 virgins,
Wir
right?
werden aufwachen, das spricht über das Gleichnis der 10 Jungfrauen.
Some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. And they that be wise shall shine as the brightness of the firmament. So the wise here are those that receive the latter rain according to August the 11th, 1840, right?
Also die Weisen hier sind diejenigen, die dann den Spätregen erhalten, gemäß 11. August 1840.
Okay, so and Sister White takes these verses and she applies it to the 7th plague when the special resurrection takes place, right? She's just using the principle of it, right?
Ellen White nimmt diese Verse und also wendet das Prinzip an, wenn die besondere Auferstehung stattfindet.
Right?
Richtig.
So it's definitely speaking about there, right?
Spricht auf jeden Fall darüber.
Daniel 12, right?
Also Daniel 12.
Such a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation, right?
Eine Zeit der Trübsal, wie sie nie gewesen ist, seit es eine Nation gab.
However, right?
Und jedoch,
Go to the next quote.
gehen wir zum nächsten Zitat.
It says, The persecution of the church did not continue throughout the entire period of the 1260 years. God in mercy to his people cut short the time of their fiery trial. This is in agreement with Matthew 24, right?
Das ist in Übereinstimmung mit Matthäus 24.
In foretelling the great tribulation to befall the church, the Saviour said, Except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened. Through the influence of the Reformation, the persecution was brought to an end prior to 1798. Now, if you look at the Sunday law, right?
Wenn man sich das Sonntagsgesetz anschaut,
Paganism, right?
Heidentum,
And Christ is marking here the Great Tribulation. So what's it marking?
Christus markiert hier die große Trübsal, also was markiert es?
Papalism, right?
Papsttum.
Okay, so you have a dragon,
Man hat einen Drachen,
right? And then where false prophets arise,
wo
right?
falsche Propheten aufkommen.
But then you have this persecution here marked by the 1260 in history, right?
Dann hat man aber dort diese Verfolgung, was durch die Verfolgung, also in der Geschichte markiert ist.
Okay, but when you come down to this fractal,
Aber wenn man zu diesem Fraktal hinkommt,
you have paganism followed by papalism, right?
hat man Heidentum gefolgt vom Papsttum.
Okay, if you just take this and put it down here,
Wenn man
right?
das hier nimmt und hier runterschreibt,
You have this same pattern, right?
hat man dasselbe Muster.
You have deceptions,
Man hat Verführung,
speaks as a dragon, right?
spricht wie ein Drache.
And the dragon is paganism, right?
Und der Drache ist das Heidentum.
So here you have paganism,
Hier hat man das Heidentum.
and here you have papalism,
Und
right?
hier hat man das Papsttum.
Just showing you that they're doing it, the Lord is breaking it down this way to show you the same repeating pattern on a smaller level, right?
Jetzt kann man sehen, wie der Herr das herunterbricht, um uns dasselbe wiederholende Muster auf verschiedenen Ebenen zu zeigen.
Everybody follow?
Kann jeder folgen?
Okay. Might not know the outcome of this, but that's neither here nor there.
Wir wissen noch nicht, was dabei herauskommt, aber das tut nichts zur Sache.
Now, just to prove to you that Christ has taken the 1260 and placing it here,
Um
right?
euch hier zu beweisen, dass Christus die 1260 nimmt und hier
It
hinsetzt
can't be speaking about here
und das nicht über das hier sprechen kann.
because it said when you go to Matthew 24, verse 22,
Weil wenn ihr zu Matthäus 24, Vers 22 geht,
saying, except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved, but for the elect's sake those days shall be shortened. And now comes it says, then if any man shall say unto you, Lo, here is Christ, or there, believe it not, for there shall arise false Christs and false prophets, and shall show great signs and wonders, insomuch that if it were possible, they shall deceive the very elect. Okay, so Sister White takes these false prophets here and parallels them with the, just turn in your Bibles to Matthew 24 and verse 9.
also geht in euren Bibeln zu Matthäus 24 und Vers 9, weil in beiden Sätzen ist parallel.
Okay, so verse 9, then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted, right? So this is this point, right?
Vers 9, das ist diese,
Which is this point.
das,
Sorry, this point, excuse me.
also
I
das ist dieser Punkt.
get mixed up with my fractals, right? Then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and ye shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. And then shall many be offended, and shall betray one another, and shall hate one another. And many false prophets shall arrive and deceive many. Right? So these false prophets, she specifically parallels with verse 23.
Diese Propheten setzt sie parallel mit Vers 23.
Then if any man shall say unto you, Lo, here is Christ, or there, believe it not, for there shall arise false Christs and false prophets, and shall show great signs and wonders, insomuch that if it were possible, they shall deceive the very elect. Right? So, it's leading you down, because we went through this in the pattern, right? It leads you down. This is all speaking about a work of deception here, right?
Und wir sind da durchgegangen in dem Muster, dass das alles über dieses Werk der Täuschung oder Verführung spricht.
And it leads you down to verse 29.
Das führt dich hinunter bis zu Vers 29.
Which says, immediately after the tribulation of those days. So which point is it?
Welcher Punkt ist das?
Where it's cut short.
Wo es verkürzt wird.
Yes?
Ja?
Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give a light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. That's this point,
Das
right?
ist dieser Punkt.
So it proves this point that it's beginning here and not beginning here,
Das
right?
beweist den Punkt, dass es hier anfängt und nicht hier.
Because the place where this gets cut short is the place where God's people get delivered,
Weil der Punkt, wo das hier verkürzt wird, ist der Punkt, wenn Gottes Volk befreit wird.
right?
Richtig.
So you just have to compare all these things, right?
Man muss all diese Dinge einfach vergleichen.
And you must go through and make sure you understand this for yourself. Otherwise, when you come to defend what you believe and somebody more clever than you starts bringing forth questions, you're just going to get all tongue-tied and make yourself look bad, right?
Und wir müssen sicherstellen, dass du das für dich selber durchgehst und diese Punkte verstehst, weil wenn du geprüft wirst und herausgefordert wirst von jemandem, deinen Glauben zu verteidigen und der dann schlaue Fragen stellt, dann wirst du dich einfach nur verwickeln und was hat Lucy?
And look bad.
Und schlecht aussehen.
Okay, so the point is that God is God. His thoughts are not our thoughts, right?
Der Punkt ist, Gott ist eben Gott. Seine Gedanken sind nicht unsere Gedanken.
He's the God of nature.
Er ist der Gott der Natur.
He's the God of these fractals,
Er
right?
ist der Gott dieser Fraktale.
Right? And you can clearly see through the Holy Spirit, He's taking this illustration of the 1260 and willfully placing it at different levels so that we can understand this, what He's trying to show us, right?
Und er markiert klar, also absichtlich diese verschiedenen 1260 und zeigt es uns auf verschiedenen Ebenen, dass wir diese verschiedenen Phasen verstehen können.
Okay, so go to Ezekiel 16, verse 23.
Geht zu
It's in the notes.
Ezekiel 16, Vers 23, das ist in den Notizen.
Now Ezekiel 16 is marking the point where they come out of Egypt,
Ezekiel
right?
16 markiert den Punkt, wenn sie aus Ägypten kommen.
Which is be here, right?
Das wäre hier.
Okay, and it talks about what He did for them. He sets them up. He anoints them. They become this light to all the nations, right?
Und er spricht darüber, was er für sie getan hat, wie er sie gesalbt hat und wie sie dann zu diesem Licht für die ganzen Nationen geworden sind.
Okay, and then what do?
Was tun sie dann aber?
They forget God,
Sie
right?
vergessen Gott.
So He brings them back into bondage,
Dann
right?
bringt er sie wieder zurück in die Knechtschaft.
And now this pattern begins, right?
Jetzt fängt dieses Muster an.
But then when you read that narrative, it brings you down to the point where He's going to punish them, right?
Aber in dieser Erzählung weiterliest, führt es dann zu dem Punkt, wenn er sie bestrafen wird.
And the point He's going to punish them, in this narrative, it says He's going to slay you, right?
Und in diesem Punkt, also wo er sie bestrafen wird in der Erzählung, da sagt es, er wird sie erschlagen.
And verse 23 says, And it came to pass, after all thy wickedness, woe, woe unto thee, saith the Lord God. What does He say?
Was sagt er?
Woe, woe.
Wehe, wehe.
Now just turn to the book of Revelation,
Geht zum Buch Offenbarung,
chapter 11.
Kapitel 11.
The Bible explains itself.
Die Bibel erklärt sich selbst.
Yes, you're right. That's Revelation 9, verse 12.
Und wir gehen jetzt Offenbarung 9 und Vers
I mean, 11:14 is also relevant, but this explains it better.
Also, das hier erklärt es besser in Offenbarung 9, Vers 12.
Okay, it says, One woe is past, and behold, there come two woes more hereafter. So you have woe, 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 right?
Und also wehe, wehe, wehe.
If you go to Revelation 11,
Wenn ihr
right,
zu Offenbarung 11 geht,
and maybe my mind is not just with me this morning, but it says woe, woe, woe.
Revelation 8.
It's Revelation 8.
13.
Also
Yes, okay, there it is.
Offenbarung
Revelation.
8, Vers 13.
Right, Revelation 8 and verse 13.
Offenbarung 8, Vers 13.
And I beheld, and I heard an angel flying through the midst of heaven, saying with a loud voice, Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth by reason of the other voices of the trumpet of the three angels which are yet to sound. So there's three woes, right?
Also 3 Wehen.
And the point is, when you look at Ezekiel 16, verse 23,
Der Punkt ist, wenn man Hesekiel 16, Vers 23 anschaut,
there's no accidents in God's word,
es
right?
gibt keine Zufälle in Gottes
He
Wort.
says, Woe, woe unto thee,
Sagt, wehe, wehe dir.
marking the point where he's going to slay them,
Das
right?
markiert den Punkt, wenn sie erschlagen wird.
Okay, we know in the prophetic narrative, right here is where the second woe begins.
Wir wissen in der prophetischen Erzählung, dass hier die zweite Wehe anfängt.
So, for me, when you go to Ezekiel 16, just place it on here. It's another proof to show the point where he's going to come against God's people to kill them, right?
Deswegen in Hesekiel 16, wenn man auf den Punkt geht, dann ist das für mich auch ein schöner weiterer Beweis, um zu zeigen, dass das der Punkt ist, wenn sie kommen, um Gottes Volk zu erschlagen.
Okay, so go to this last quote.
Gehen wir zu diesem letzten Zitat.
It's also one that we're very familiar with from First Testimonies.
Mit dem sind wir auch sehr vertraut vom ersten Band der Zeugnisse, also 1t.
I was shown the inhabitants of the earth in the utmost confusion. War, bloodshed, privation, want, famine, and pestilence were abroad in the land. As these things surrounded God's people, they began to press together and to cast aside their little difficulties. Self-dignity no longer controlled them, and deep humility took its place. Suffering, perplexity, and privation caused reason to resume its throne, and the passionate and unreasonable man became sane and acted with discretion and wisdom. My attention was then called from the scene. There seemed to be a little time of peace. Once more the inhabitants of the earth were presented before me, and again everything was in the utmost confusion. Strife, war, and bloodshed, with famine and pestilence, raged everywhere. Other nations were engaged in this war and confusion. War caused famine, want and bloodshed caused pestilence. And then men's hearts failed them for fear, for looking after those things which are coming on the earth. Right? So when you just compare it, this with Luke 21, right?
Wenn man das einfach mit Lukas 21 vergleicht,
We know that that time of trouble when men's hearts fail them for fear is here, right?
wissen wir, dass diese Zeit der Trübsal, wenn die Herzen der Menschen vor Furcht versagen, hier ist.
Okay, so this is the distress of nations, right?
Das ist die Drangsal der Nation.
This is the distress upon God's people,
Das
right?
ist die Drangsal über Gottes Volk.
So these two times of distress are these two times of trouble, right?
Diese zwei Zeiten der Drangsal sind diese zwei Zeiten der Trübsal.
Okay, and okay, so you have this pattern on three levels. It shows you these two times of trouble,
Man
right?
hat also dieses Muster auf 3 Ebenen. Es zeigt dir diese zwei Zeiten der Trübsal.
Okay, we've got to go through these and understand why these things are the way they are, right?
Wir müssen da durchgehen und verstehen, warum die Sachen so sind, wie sie sind.
Okay. The last point I want to make, and then we'll close on this thought.
Letzter Punkt, den ich machen will. Wir werden mit diesem Gedanken abschließen.
Okay, so we know that Matthew 24 is in relation to the history of the destruction of Jerusalem,
Wir
right?
wissen, dass Matthäus 24 in Bezug ist auf die Geschichte der Zerstörung von Jerusalem.
Sister White takes it, puts Cestius at the beginning, right?
Gott nimmt das und setzt Cestius an den Anfang.
Okay, so here we have Cestius.
Hier haben wir Cestius.
And she puts Titus here,
Sie
right?
setzt Titus hier hin.
Titus is when they come and surround Jerusalem. It's just repeating, right?
Titus ist, wenn sie kommen und Jerusalem umlagern, das wiederholt sich.
Because I just put it here, right?
Weil das schreibe ich hier hin.
Surrounding Jerusalem, surrounding Jerusalem, surrounding Jerusalem. It's just the same, right?
Also Jerusalem umlagern, hier auch und hier auch, das ist eben dasselbe.
Okay, but this is the point where they're going to come and kill you. It's this time of distress,
Das
right?
ist diese Zeit, wo sie kommen werden, um dich zu töten. Das ist diese Zeit der
It
Drangsal.
brings you into this time period where you sigh and cry,
Das
right?
bringt dich in diese Zeit, wo du dann seufzt und klagst.
Where the Lord can deliver you, right?
Und das ist dann, wo der Herr dich befreit.
Okay, it's marked in this point here, right?
Das markiert dann diesen Punkt hier.
Okay, but Cestius has to flee away, bringing about a time of peace,
Aber
right?
Cestius muss wegfliehen, das bringt dann eine Zeit des Friedens.
Okay, so if we put Cestius flees here, right?
Wenn wir hinschreiben, Cestius flieht hier weg.
Biggest problem that I have now, right? When you look at this illustration, what's happening there in Ukraine, how do we fit this into this narrative,
Das
right?
große Problem, das ich jetzt habe, wenn wir uns jetzt auch diese Darstellung anschauen mit Ukraine, was dort stattfindet, wie kann man dann das hier mit reinnehmen?
Okay, where do you see the south in Matthew 24,
Wo sieht man den Süden in Matthäus 24?
right? Okay, I mean you have to bring Daniel 7 and 8 in there. When you bring Daniel 7 and 8 in there, now you have it,
Wenn
right?
du Daniel 7 und 8 mit reinbringt, dann hast du das.
Okay, when you bring Daniel 11 in there, you have it,
Wenn
right?
du Daniel 11 mit reinbringst, dann hast du es auch.
Okay, and at the moment you see that these things are both running simultaneously,
Und im
right?
Moment sehen wir, wie diese beiden Dinge gleichzeitig stattfinden.
There's something really deep about this that we don't understand,
Es
right?
ist wirklich etwas Tiefes darin, was wir nicht verstehen.
Because I've gone through this in my mind and tried all the different fractals and levels, and I don't know how to explain this.
Ich bin da in meinem Verstand durchgegangen, habe all die verschiedenen Fraktalen und Ebenen angeschaut und ich weiß nicht, was mit dem hier ist.
Okay, because I mean, can't be fleeing away at an earlier point, then this come up, and then Titus come back.
Er kann nicht an einem früheren Zeitpunkt wegfliehen und dann kommt das und dann kommt Titus zurück.
Okay, so anyway, I don't know if everybody's grasping the problem, but we need to understand how in the Sunday law, how will this appear? How will it look like?
Und ich weiß nicht, ob jetzt jeder das Problem versteht, aber wir müssen wirklich begreifen, wie das im Sonntagsgesetz erscheinen wird und wie es aussehen wird.
Because the illustration at the moment is Putin surrounded Kiev, right?
Ja, die Darstellung im Moment ist, dass Putin Kiew umlagert hat.
He's got to flee away.
Er muss wegfliehen.
Then he's got to come back with this great army from the north,
Dann
right?
muss er mit einer großen Armee vom Norden zurückkommen.
Okay, so where does this appear in the narrative?
Wo erscheint das in der Erzählung?
Okay, so from my perspective, I was looking at World War I just to see if there was a change, because this is communism, right?
Aus meiner Perspektive, also ich habe mir den Ersten Weltkrieg nochmal angeschaut, weil das hier ist ja der Kommunismus.
Was there a change of power somewhere during World War I where communism came into play, right?
Ob es dort einen Wechsel der Macht gab, wo dann der Kommunismus ins Spiel kam.
Okay, so these are just my thoughts. All these things we have to look at very closely,
Das sind
right?
nur meine Gedanken und all die Dinge müssen wir uns sehr genau anschauen.
Okay, so still much that we don't understand,
Es
right?
ist immer noch viel, was wir nicht verstehen.
Okay, we'll finish there for this morning.
Heute Morgen werden wir hier aufhören.
Okay, let's close in prayer.
Lasst uns mit Gebet abschließen.
No, don't just leave.
Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you that we could look now at this pattern,
Lieber himmlischer Vater, wir danken dir, dass wir uns diese Muster anschauen konnten.
and that you showed us in the parallels,
Dass du uns die Parallelen gezeigt hast.
and please help us also to reconcile now this illustration of Ukraine and also Biden and Trump.
Hilf uns auch bitte die Darstellung von der vom Ukraine-Krieg und auch von Biden und Trump miteinander zusammenzubringen.
And please lead our minds to the right stories and illustrations.
Und führe bitte unseren Verstand zu den richtigen Geschichten und Darstellungen,
That we can really understand what is going on at the moment.
dass wir wirklich verstehen können, was momentan vor sich geht.
That we would see the signs of the times and not be deceived.
Und dass wir die Zeichen der Zeit erkennen können und nicht verführt werden.
And please make us deeply interested in your word.
Und bitte mach uns tiefgehend interessiert an deinem Wort,
that we would look upward and not downward on the earth,
dass wir hinaufblicken und nicht hinabblicken auf die Erde,
and that we can receive the light that you want to give us at this time.
dass wir das Licht erhalten können, was du uns zu dieser Zeit geben möchtest.
And I ask that you would also bless us this day,
Und ich bitte, dass du uns auch an diesem Tag segnen möchtest,
and that you would help us to go through these points again and again in our minds,
und dass du uns hilfst, wieder und wieder durch diese Punkte in unserem Verstand hindurchzugehen,
that we would keep our eyes fixed on Jesus.
dass wir unsere Augen gerichtet auf Jesus halten.
And we ask and pray this in Jesus' name.
Und wir bitten und beten das in Jesu Namen.
Amen.
Amen.